This is an interview pre-chat with Ian about WoW.
Over the years, me and you have logged heads a few times about a few things, and then today you 180'd nearly everything we've thought about over the last few years. What's going on? And like, this is a dramatic shift, going to like account focus, the whole thing.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, it's what I laid out on the panel today. It's a mix of, we said with the technology, but we made the technology get there. It really is letting go of old stubbornness.
Yeah.
It's something we've been talking about, I think, since midway through Shadowlands. Certainly not before Shadowlands, but midway through onwards.
Well, that makes sense because midway through Shadowlands was whenever everybody quit the game. So yeah, exactly. That's totally fucking true. And that's what it took in order for them to start listening, is everybody quit.
A mix of seeing reception to Shadowlands, a mix of also seeing how the modern player base played Classic over the course of 2019, 2020, that made us kind of just rethink all these assumptions about how WoW should be and what was integral to WoW versus what needed to evolve, what needed to adapt to the way players were looking to game in the modern age. And so I think, for a long time, a lot of these character investment philosophies were the byproducts, were handed down from my forebears, from the people who trained me, from the original leads.
Exactly. We came into a lot of rules that were established.
Yeah. And it was like, your job as game director, Ian, is to safeguard this tradition, do it well.
I think that's definitely true. And it feels like, there's a lot of things in WoW that are like that because they've always been like that. I think, for example, boss runbacks are like really good example of this. Like, there's no reason that you should have to run back to a boss. You should just respawn in front of the boss. Because clearly respawning in front of the boss isn't a problem. Because if it was, you wouldn't have bosses like, for example, Farak, where you respawn in front of the boss. So if it is a problem, then why do some bosses have it? And if it's not a problem, then why don't all bosses have it? It doesn't make sense. Hard to disagree. You need punishment for dying? You do. It's called dying. You already did get punished. You lost. You wasted your time. And this is what I'm saying, is that you have a community of people who like having their time wasted because that's the way it's always been. It's always been like this. This is the way the game is. That's the way it needs to be. But the truth is that no, it's not. It doesn't have to be like that. And there's so many things like this. MMO players are conditioned to be abused. MMO players are conditioned to take pride in having their time wasted.
And so taking a step back and being like, well, no, what if the tradition's wrong now? What if the tradition was right 20 years ago but needs to change today? That can be a hard conclusion to come to, but we're certainly there now.
What was the first domino to fall? I'm really curious, because today a lot fell. It's like, okay, we're getting rid of not only the account, we're going more account focused instead of the character.
I think the domino that really fell initially was account-wide achievements and account-wide mount tab. Like, it happened like years and years and years ago, but like that was the beginning of this.
Focus. But we're also dropping, like, taxing you on moving resources around. Like, all these very established things are happening. And it felt like one thing fell, and it's like, let's look at everything here. This no longer makes sense. This no longer makes sense. And it doesn't fit together. So was it a case of that?
I think that's probably to an extent. I mean, this is run back, in my opinion, is to facilitate conversation in a group about what went wrong and what can improve for next poll. Okay, well then why don't all bosses have runbacks? Why is it that the last boss, who's the hardest boss, doesn't have a runback? Wouldn't you need to talk about that one the most? There's no logical consistency with that.
Yeah, I think it was ultimately. It was asking the question of, are these principles actually making our players happier? Who are they serving? If we are honoring some vision, some set of values that we hold dear as developers, but it's alienating our players, who is that good for? So it's not us, and it's certainly not them. And so I think looking at the data...
And that's what I feel like Blizzard did for such a long time, is they held on to these systems and these changes, like almost like in spite of the players. I think like the corruption vendor was a good example of that. Or, Legion artifact weapons.
Hearing the feedback from not just our community, but also ourselves, members of the team, who all play alts as well. That, the focus really, I think quality time is something that is a through line through all of this. We're trying to respect players' time, but doing that is not just, about what we do in an individual character. It's about making sure that as much of the time that you choose to spend in our world feels like high value to you and not business.
I think that's a big reason too, and I think the big problem is that nowadays people play a lot of different games, whereas before people only used to play WoW. And I actually don't think this is a shortcoming of WoW. And I think that even WoW has cannibalized itself in a certain way. So a good example of that is Classic WoW or Wrath of the Lich King or Hardcore. If you're spending time farming a reputation in one game, you're not spending time farming something else. So whenever people are evaluating the time value of what they're doing, even against another version of the same game, that's bad. So yeah, I think that WoW exists in an ecosystem, whereas before, WoW was the ecosystem. Does that make sense?
Easy work, not wasting the time so that you can get to the stuff that you enjoy in the hours that you have left. And so it's that, the product of that set of realizations, I think probably started us seriously down this path 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
But then we ran into, as I mentioned, a bunch of technical challenges where it's like, okay, you could see the piecemeal movement in these directions of
like with
more
energy.
things, unlocking on vendors and being mailable to alts and so forth. But the actual solution.
Yeah, he's right that like it seemed like they started doing this like towards the second half of Shadowlands, like what he said, and like then afterwards it was like kind of just band-aid solutions.
And required, expansion level work to deliver.
I don't think it's something that's appreciated enough, right? Because we talked about it with the bag space of like the actual original backpack. Because like legacy reputations, like you said today, yeah, we're going there. It's going to be retroactive though. We're going to have to like go backwards and backwards and backwards. And I'm sure there's some people who's like, can't you just copy the number out of one character and call it GG? But no, it's kind of a big effort, I assume, because you obviously would like to do it very quickly. But
yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, and it's not obviously the number is not the problem. It's all the other places that reference the number. All the parts of our quest system, our player condition system, vendors, etc., that are where are they looking and what's the source of truth for this? They're also, in the case of account-wide reputation, there are design challenges to work through and things to come up with. We need to make sure that we're changing our sources of reputation to also largely exist at a warband level. If now the right way to max a renown becomes we'll just do the exact same things on 6 different characters.
Yeah,
and because
Ooh, looks like Ian might have played a little bit of Lost Ark.
adding the
on
same
top.
bucket. Well, A, now that's unbalanced, and B, that's actually like not fun either. The point shouldn't be repeat the exact same activity in multiple characters for more rewards. And so again, all of that needs to change as well, right? We need to rethink a lot of how we build the content to just be framed in an account level sense to look at the player behind the keyboard rather than the character that they're playing.
Oh, that's superb. I wanted to come at you with a lot of feedback I've seen from my audience, which is a lot of people who would like, they call it the WoW Exodus and all those kind of people who are very burned with Blizzard, but do want to come back, but also of like untrustworthy and they're skeptics and all that kind of stuff. And the cadence we saw from an interview with Maria earlier is that
dude, Preach is asking the big questions, isn't he? Holy shit.
Cadence is looking like 1.5 years per expansion. Some like slightly slower, but it's like a roughish.
Yeah, I think the key points there. I think the most important thing, or like the content train has no brakes, is the goal here, right? We don't want to have any long.
I think they've delivered on that too. Dragonflight has brought out a lot of content. Like it's the first time we ever had a roadmap for retail. Like like a lot of developers say something like that, and they're like, "Oh yeah, the content train has no brakes." Sure, buddy. But like with retail, I think it's true. Yeah, they've been releasing a lot of stuff.
Pauses, any long lulls where there's nothing new going on in WoW ever again. And now those updates come in different shapes and sizes. There's expansions, there's big, .0 patches, then there's some of the smaller patches that we've rolled out over Dragonflight. I think we're really happy with how that mix has worked out over the last year.
It was rapid,
I think,
Dragonflight.
Yeah, and I think and it's going to continue. And that's what we're signing up for. That's what the future is. That's not, expansion specific. That is what the whole World Soul Saga aims to deliver. I think something that as a point of personal pride and learnings as a developer, like when I first became game director on WoW. It was during the Legion expansion, right before Legion came out. And one of the things that I will admit I personally pushed pretty hard for was a much more rapid, aggressive, robust patch plan than we had seen in any of our previous expansions.
And to be fair, remember Legion had like a 77-day patch cadence? I think they delivered with that. Like Legion had a lot of content.
I thought it was this will be amazing for players.
Yeah.
And if I may flatter myself, I think it was. But it came at the expense of Battle for Azeroth development. It came at the expense of just getting the next expansion done, but also
resources
polished.
are finite, right? Like
exactly. Resources are finite.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then we backed away from that for a while. We're like, oh, well, that clearly was, it's not worth sinking the next expansion in some ways to do this.
I hope they realize that they sunk Battle for Azeroth by implementing bad systems and just not tuning things properly. BFA had a lot of really great things, and BFA had a tremendous amount of content in general. Like 8.2 is one of the best patches that Blizzard has ever done in the history of WoW. It was insane how big 8.2 was. So I'm not going to shit on BFA for that at all. The reason why BFA was bad is because you couldn't trade Azerite gear at the beginning. It's because you couldn't respec Azerite gear easily. You needed 3 versions of the same helmet, 1 for each spec. It was stupid. That's like, you need a corruption vendor. You had to do visions 4 times before your raid to make sure that your cloak was upgraded. Like, these were the problems with the game then. It had nothing to do with, like, the amount of content. It had to do with how you interfaced with the content. They could have left 8.3 out for 6 more months, and it probably would have been fine, as long as they gave people the ability to play other classes with full corruptions. But because the systems were so suffocating, people just wanted to get out of the game, because it was actually a fun game to play.
But I think over the both, learning from experience, but also growing the team and investing in the team and doing things like our acquisition of Proletariat last year to kind of continue to marshal the resources that we need, have gotten us to a point now where I think we can pull this off, where we can deliver the patch content that we did during Dragonflight and still be set for something as ambitious as the World Soul Saga, as War Within, as the next step.
I think the big concern that I have with a lot of this newer content is that, like, I feel like a lot of it is like flash in the pan. Like, you do it for a few months and then you never do it again. And I would like if the big systems that are super successful, they took an approach kind of like PoE, where they go kind of core, where these systems now become part of the base game, kind of, and they exist on an account-wide level. Like, I would really, really like that. Because right now, I think it's a huge problem. Yeah, like dragon riding. I think dragon riding is the best example I can give for that. I just hope they do more of that. That way, like, you don't add in this cool, new, crazy system, and then nobody gives a shit about it after 6 months.
Now, in terms of the content, the cadence within the saga itself, I think our goal is, as Chris said, faster than it has been. Certainly faster than the 2+ years where, it'll take until the end of the decade to finish the story. That's not what anyone is signing up for. But beyond that, I think we're going to, be guided by our community, make sure that, we also give the content time to breathe. And that if we're going to a new zone, we're going to a new raid, we're not rushing you through it just to get to the next step of the story. We want to still make sure that all of it feels rich and deep, and that we're earning every step of that journey.
Yeah.
One final note, just I guess I've seen questions raised on the internet and elsewhere. Like,
the skeptics are out in force at the moment.
Oh, is this like shrinkflation? Like how,
Bro, he brought it up. Like, he didn't even answer a question. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. True. Good question. That would mean more tame expeditions without doing more exciting additions. Game will be bloated as fuck. Well, I think that keeping a, I think that they should just do what PoE does, right? Where, like, whenever each league comes out, the league exists in core like this, right? So it's not like each league is like this. They all exist like this. So yeah, I definitely definitely think people think this, the shrinkflation. Shrinkflation is whenever, instead of raising the price of something, they lower the amount of food that you get, right? So instead of like a 16-ounce drink, now you get a 12-ounce drink. And it was $5, and now it's still $5, but you get less.
You get fewer chips in your bag of chips.
Yeah, you're just trying to push it out to sell an expansion 6 months quicker.
Exactly. No, these are expansions, right?
Exactly.
War Within has 4 zones and 8 dungeons and a raid and new levels and...
A hot take. That's the problem. You need something more. I need to reinvent the game. You've got to reinvent the game. Like, I get it. And, retail WoW is a known entity. It's existed for 20 years. But, like, the last time that WoW really reinvented itself was Legion. I feel like every patch in Legion and after Legion, I'm just playing the same patch. But after Legion, I really felt like I was playing a different game than I was in Warlords of Draenor or in Mists of Pandaria. Like, I think that the problem is that, oh, well, what do you mean? We're adding 4 new zones. We're adding 8 new dungeons. That's not... I don't think, like, that we got enough dungeons. We got enough zones. Like, add depth. And, like, maybe delves are going to be that, right? Add delves to depth, right? I mean, I don't know. We'll see. But we need something that's, like, innovative that makes the game feel fresh again. And Legion made the game feel fresh. For all of its problems and all of its, I don't know, like, setbacks and everything, it did make the game feel fresh.
We're not going to talk much in detail, but Midnight, I can say, we'll have 4 zones and dungeons and a raid. Like, these are expansions as you've come to know them. Yeah. And we're just going to, not have gaps. And we're going to be ambitious and purposeful as we unfold the story.
Yeah, I think it's such a big move. From what we've seen in the past where expansions have been almost self-contained, one and done sort of scenarios.
Yeah.
How has it been internally with, like, seemingly now a 7-year-ish plan that has a very clear and distinct, actually, beginning, middle, and end with War Within and then Nightmare and then Last Titan? Has that been really comfortable to work with? Like, okay, we have a beginning and we have an end, and it's not a case of sitting around the table every year and going, okay, are we going to the Dragon Isles next time? Or are we going to space? Yeah. What are we doing?
It's partly comfortable, partly terrifying, right? I mean, certainly pulling back the like, because we're.
I think that makes sense, right? Because, like, if people aren't liking where things are going, you're locked into something for the next 7 years. So you can't just be like, oh wait, never mind.
Making a commitment.
Yes.
We are, and there's aspects of this that now we can't change. We're going to have to work around. If we if we realize there are some challenges with the ideas we have, if we get feedback, if we get new ideas along the way, we're going to have to fit that to the structure that we've laid out. At the same time, yes, certainly, knowing for sure this is where we're going, this is where we're going to be, aids us in both planning for the future, but I think building...
It also helps them, like, future-proof existing systems that are being added.
Richer worlds and stories today, because we can foreshadow, we can plant the little seeds for things that we know will make sense, as opposed to at times in the past, frankly, doing what seemed cool at the moment, and then, asking ourselves, well, what do we do next?
Yeah,
and then
trying to piece YouTube shots is what it feels like. It's like, this is a really cool cutscene, but then, we talked about the world not reflecting it and where's it going, but now, well, it will reflect because we're already building the next world.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It's, I have two things.
Cataclysm, right, was cool in that way. It changed a lot of things.
Things on this. One is the technical side is, when we last spoke, we talked about the issues of, we came up with a feature, the community really liked it, but it didn't show the cracks and the crumbles until late expansion. And obviously with the development cycle that you had internally is like the next thing that was already built off that is already steamrolling. So has there been, considering you're creating a lot of evergreen content now, has there been any changes internally in the structure that allows for a much more flexible adaptivity to, like, delves, we could talk about delves. Like, delves started off, people loved them, they were great, they were getting heroic gear from solo play. Towards the end of the expansion though, they really started to show some issues that people were having with them and et cetera, but we've already built the next 12 delves.
I think most of the time the problem exists with the implementation and not the system at a core level. Like, for example, Azerite armor was really cool at a core level. Artifact weapons were really cool at a core level. Pretty much every system, Torghast was really cool at a core level. The problem is almost never with the content itself. It's with either the tuning, the implementation, or the reward structure of the content. So I actually really wish, I was sad whenever they decided to just give up on Islands after BFA, or they just decided to give up on Torghast after Shadowlands. I don't think that you should do that. The problem with Torghast and Islands was that they were mandatory, not that they were bad content. People liked doing them in the alpha. How is it that people liked it in the alpha and they don't like it now? Doesn't that mean that it's not the system fundamentally?
That's absolutely a risk. I think that remains a risk in any live service world. We no matter how nimble we get, at some point we still need to plan ahead and commit and start working on something before we know for sure where the winds are blowing in the present. What we can do to insulate against that is just share our plans as transparently as possible, get things out on alpha and beta for testing as early as possible, and I think make sure we're aware of past pitfalls that have only shown up later on,
Yeah.
and do what we can to surface them early, to really ask questions and try to focus testing on repeating the same pieces of content over and over, understanding where are the breaking points here, at what point.
I think making account-wide progression for these systems, and also making it to where the systems have a rested timer. So like if you miss one Torghast run, or one delve run, you can come back next week and you can do 2 delve runs, or you get 50% from one delve run, 150%. So like you get more rewards, so you can kind of build it up, and it's not exactly the same as doing it each week. It's kind of like Lost Ark, how like they have rested bonus for like Chaos Dungeons and like Guardian raids. I think that they should do the same thing. Adding in those 2 things, account-wide progression and rested catch-ups, would solve, I think, most of the problems that almost every system in WoW has.
Will the shelf life of this content have been exceeded? And at what point do we need to move on so that we're not caught by surprise and we can make changes early and plan around them down the line? But it's more of an art than a science, right?
Yeah, for sure. On the delves, though, just quickly, are they dynamic in any way?
They should be.
It's like the Skittering Breach. If I do Skittering Breach week 1,
I'm sure they're probably
is it the same one the next week?
So I think the goal. So the goal is for the places to feel relatively consistent. These aren't randomly.
It's procedurally generated with handcrafted zones. It's the same as like Wayfinder or Diablo 4, it seems.
Generated Diablo-style
procedural
maps
stuff,
or whatever.
yeah.
But in terms of the spawning there, these sorts of events that you might run into, those should vary.
Yeah.
There will be a pool of available options that will cycle through over the course of the weeks. So again, it's like trying to think through what's this going to look like between 12 different delves, different enemies that you can encounter in each, different events that you can encounter in each. There should be enough permutations there, we hope anyway, to keep the experience feeling fresh for quite some time.
Oh, superb.
It probably won't. And I think the reason why is that I think a lot of the events will be too easy and the rewards won't be tuned properly. The reason why Torghast was boring was because there wasn't a super hard mode. And whenever you added in the timer for completion, it wasn't fun having to kill every single rat on every level in order to get 100% completion because of how the completion ranking was weighted. So again, like this is the system that was designed, and it was designed in a way to make it not unfun. It's not that the game was unfun, it's that the system rewarded and incentivized a type of play that wasn't enjoyable to players. That's it. You didn't need 100%? You didn't need it, you're right. But 100% made it a lot easier. It needs to be challenging like a real roguelike. Yeah, like for example in Hades, like whenever you fight Charon. Like Charon's fucking hard. Like that's a hard boss, and it almost never spawns. But if it does, it's a big deal. There's a lot of games that have things like this. You need to have random events that are actually challenging.
Really good. This looked to me, when Chris was explaining what the saga is, like a shift to a much more narrative-driven Warcraft than maybe we've seen in the past. There's always a narrative. Like I said, it's mostly cutscene contained, then there's a break, and we sort of get it piecemeal and things like that. And now you're making at least a 6-year long narrative that's coming out. So have you had to change the team internally to get more like actual story writers in or anything like that? Or is this something you've like given to the team to play with and say, go have fun?
Yeah, I think we haven't changed the team composition for this, other than obviously Chris coming back.
Yeah.
But no, I think the narrative team that we have has really embraced this and run with it. And I think, as you alluded to earlier, it's exciting to know more about where we're going down the line. Having that information empowers everybody. It's something that, when we were focused so much on the short term very often, could be frustrating for everyone from artists to encounter designers to quest designers, where they're like, hey, what do we know about this place? What do we know about this culture? Because it'll help me with my creative work. And often the answer would be, well, we're still figuring that out. We don't exactly know.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that if you, like the way Ian is saying this, a lot of these like retcons and continuity problems, yeah, I can see exactly how that would happen.
Know yet, come back a bit later, but they have to start doing something.
Yeah.
Whereas now, we know exactly where we're going to be adventuring in 2 years.
Yeah.
Let's think about who the prominent characters are going to be at that point in time.
Are we going to see some new faces? Obviously, the cutscenes Xander and Thrall.
Yeah.
Terran that team did. I'm sure when you saw that, you were like, okay.
Yeah, our Pareto Cinematics team are
Yeah, I was talking to Terran before. He was
It
like,
was insanely good. It was incredible, the cinematic. Like, the quality of the cinematic was incredible.
I was crying every time I was making it. Like, oh my God, it's so good. But now you've got this opportunity where it's not feeling rushed, is what I'm hoping for. This is my personal hope. It's like, I love video game stories because you can play through them, you feel connected. Are we going to see, feels weird, I'm asking story-driven questions to you, but it's always mechanics focused, but are we going to see some new faces come in?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'd set the...
Good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we can do that more purposefully. It's a mix of, obviously, familiar faces, Thrall, Anduin, Jaina, etc. Also, taking some existing characters that have not necessarily been in the spotlight and recognizing they're going to have important parts to play in what is to come. Right? I mean, talked about Ilaria, certainly, Turalian, with his history with the light, is going to be a factor in any
Turalian's a bitch.
coming war between the light and the void. There are others who have their stories. How do we begin to reintroduce them to players? Knowing if we know someone is going to be central to 12 at this point, to midnight, how can we make sure that when that arrives, everyone knows who they are and they're not being introduced for the very first time? But then also, we can think about characters we want to have central roles in 12 or 13 who are being introduced for the very first time, who are going to meet for the very first time in our journeys in the War Within, and not have that just be happenstance, but much more purposeful than ever before.
I think that a lot of these characters, like, for example, I think the best one is Denathrius. Denathrius was added into the game in one patch, and everybody loved him. So, and look at Li Shen. Li Shen was the same thing. So you don't really need to have, like, a lot of build-up for a character. You just need to have a badass character that people really like. Bob Salami, yeah.
Makes me more than anything. Genuinely. Like, I know we always focus on mechanics and stuff, but God, I wish I could care about some of these characters. That's such a big part of the gaming is like, I want to care if this person turns up. I want to care if that person goes. This is a skeptic question because obviously it's caused quite an uproar. Is this the first time you've, with the pre-order, you can play a little bit earlier?
Ooh. Ouch. Look at his face.
How did we get to that decision? Because obviously, people hate feeling like they're behind.
Understood. So I think we want to be very mindful. I mean, we're looking at what Diablo has done, what other games have done. At the end of the day, we're also trying to offer the maximum value in the package and the pre-purchase, but also just in the base expansion package.
What he's saying is they want people to give them more money, and if you want people to give you more money, you have to give them more stuff.
Price is unchanged. The base level package now includes a boost, so I think it's a better value across the board than Dragonflight was. With early access, we're definitely sensitive to any fairness issues or perceptions there. But I think the key here is that as everyone who certainly European players...
Well, it's clearly not fair, right? It's clearly not if somebody spends more money and they can play the game earlier. So, like, that's just how it is. Now, if they're going to do it, that's fine. Like, and he's right, a lot of other games do it. And how am I going to get mad at Blizzard when every other game does it? I'm not.
There's no, until that first weekly reset, Mythic Zero is not available. Anything weekly is not available. Wrapper quests, profession cooldowns, we're going to make sure, also look at things like rare drop tables. The point here is just a little bit of a head start on level.
I mean, don't the people that have it's this thing, right? It's like, I don't know why, like, I don't think you can justify this, because just be like, yeah, well, we wanted to give people a higher value. We think Dragonflight, it's an improved value even from Dragonflight. That's about it. Like, there's no way you can justify this, because, like, okay, so nothing comes out in the reset. Okay, so then the people that can't afford it have to work harder in order to be caught up for the first reset. Like, that's effectively what he's saying.
Maybe, if you feel like you don't have as much spare time to get to max level so that when your friends start running Mythic Zeros who were able to take time off for the expansion, you're behind them. Let everybody kind of get a little head start there. But the actual, even pre-end game stuff is going to be inaccessible until the first weekly reset, which will be after the full global launch has occurred. And really, the intent is that by 2 weeks in, certainly by the time the season starts, there should be no perceptible difference, no advantage between someone who had the early.
And he's right. Ian is right. The early access advantage only matters inside of like the first week of the game. And then outside of that, it doesn't matter at all. And being able to upsell like millions of people potentially for $20 in order to get that is such a cheap trade-off that I would say early access is less negative than adding in a store mount or adding in WoW tokens or adding in a lot of things into the game. So personally, I care about early access less than almost anything else because it's like early access literally doesn't exist or matter after like 2 weeks, whereas store mounts are always in the game. You know, you have level boosts are always in the game. Buying gold is always in the game. So I'm totally okay with them doing it, but I also think it's indefensible.
Access for someone who didn't.
Yeah, so are we expecting to see, like we saw with Dragonflight,
It's indefensible from the perspective of player value.
Mobs, the rares that are popping up were such an enormous part of the game.
That's something we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think, you know, in the fine print on the pre-order page, it focuses on, you know, Mythic Dungeon,
yeah,
weeklies.
Rares
are an obvious one, right? It's like, I think, I would say right now, all the high-end epics and those loot tables should be conditioned not to drop until the first reset.
Super. So I think that's the message to get out.
And that's the sort of, philosophically, that's the sort of stuff we're aiming at here. This is really just about, you know, getting a head start on leveling, not a head start on the competitive aspects of gearing in the end game.
Okay. I guess my last question, because they give me the signal. Chris's phrase, and I assume he talks about this till was, "It's time to come home." Which, I mean, obviously from my perspective, was like reaching out to me and the people who stepped away for a while. Although I still play a lot, but...
well, I think that Warcraft, like, their biggest audience of people that they need to attract are people that have already played the game and aren't playing it right now. There are more people in the market that have played WoW than people that haven't. I would say, like, in the MMORPG market, probably 80 or 90% of people have played WoW before. Or they've at least consciously made a decision, I'm not going to play WoW because of this, that, or the other thing. Like,
my audience does not.
Saturation.
Is that something we thought about in Silly? Because like Dragonflight was like the transition period. You moved to the more seasonal play, and I'm interested to see... in fact, I'm going to use this as my last question. You moved to seasonal play more in Dragonflight, and that is now quite openly what you discuss. How has the reception been internally to like this freedom and relaxation that we talked about last time of like, yeah, people are going to drift away for a little bit towards the end of the patch cycle. That's okay, because it doesn't mean we need to come up with a billion chores for them to do to make them play every day.
That's a huge positive, and like that was such a toxic philosophy. Just keep people engaged in the game 24/7 by giving them mountains of chores that are boring, that they have to do to stay competitive.
So, I mean, there have been so many amazing games released this year. Right, we'd be doing our players a disservice if we tried to say, no, you have to play WoW all the time, or you're going to fall behind and it's not going to be relevant, and therefore you have to ignore all these other amazing things that are happening in the industry or elsewhere. You know, I think we want to understand and build a healthy, long-term relationship with our players that is, like you said, about respect.
Yes.
And hopefully, you know, a lot of what we've been doing is trying to re-earn trust, knowing that it needs to be re-earned. Dragonflight was, I think, a breath of fresh air in a lot of ways. But, you know, when we say it's time to come home, there's a new beginning, right? And it's a chance to get in on the ground floor of something that's going to be an amazing journey that starts here.
Okay, well, I'm coming home, so that's okay.
Love to hear it.
All right, let's wrap it there.
Hey, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. Like, I think this was a great interview. Yeah, I think it was a great interview. Preach asked a lot of, there's the video right there. Make sure to give it a like, give him a sub. This is, I think, his second channel here. So yeah, new beginning for the third time. Well, I don't really care. I mean, if the game's fun, I play it, right? I do think that they have changed the fundamental philosophy with WoW, but there are, so like, this is going to be like my list right here. List of things that I think Blizzard should change in WoW that they are too stubborn to change. Okay, number one, I'm going to just go ahead and knock out a few of these real quick, and these are the things that I would really like to see Blizzard do differently, right? Because obviously we've talked about this many times, but these would be the actual things that I would want to see kind of altered or improved or whatever you want to call it. Mythic lockouts. Make them the same as everything else. Remove key depletion in Mythic Plus completely. Remove runbacks in raids. Remove the stupid metagame of res protection. I mean, this kind of ties into the above point, but that's basically it. Stop overloading trash mobs in Mythic Plus with 3 different abilities. These abilities per NPC. What's res protection? Making sure somebody has a soul stone, or everybody has to run back. Or everybody does have a soul stone, one person releases, you have to summon him. Add summoning portals at checkpoints for each boss, like Stakes of Marika in Elden Ring. So that's another one right there. They'll get a warlock? No, but what if you don't have a warlock? So then do you just deserve to have your time wasted dramatically? No, I don't think so. Make more gear account-wide. Removing key depletes in Mythic Plus defeats the purpose of it. You're risking it when pushing, but you're not, though. Because, like, 4 other people aren't taking any risk. How's that fair? That one person loses their key and then 4 people have no repercussions. Because, so, like, I mean, when, you can't really make an argument that, like, oh, well, you need to have this because it makes players risk, whenever most of the players in every single group aren't risking. And also, it'd be easy for everyone to push it to high levels. So, do you know how the game works? So, like, if you can't do a Mythic plus 30, like, I don't think you realize how hard a Mythic plus 30 is. I think that they should remove key depletion, but I don't think your key should upgrade just based off of you. So basically, I didn't say they should give you a key upgrade every single time that you clear a dungeon. You shouldn't upgrade every time you clear a dungeon unless you do it within a timer. But you shouldn't deplete no matter what. Do you see what the difference is there? So no negative punishments? There is a negative punishment. You lose and you waste your time. Because if you have a 21 key, you can just spam it and then you can just practice it over and over again. It's, again, like, there's no, and this is what I was talking about before, how this is like reductive logic. It's key depletions are good, and let me figure out why they're good, rather than what is a good system, and do key depletions lead to, are key depletions the conclusion of a good system? It's reductive logic. Personally, I think if a key doesn't deplete, a guy can get 4 other people over and over again, and you can easily get boosted. Okay, so, like, boosting's already in the game, right? Like, everybody does boosting all of the time. It's constant. So because boosting is so popular and there's so much of it already, why is it a problem that it's slightly easier to boost? You think it's a better idea, so you want to handicap the entire population of the game because a small subset of them might have an easier time getting boosted. You're handicapping the entire player base for this. Is it worth it? No, it's not, because you still have people that are buying boosts with real money. And it's not even against the rules to do it. Nobody plays anymore because of people like this guy? Exactly. And these are people that it's more important for them to make the game hard than to make it fun. And this is the biggest problem that WoW has right now, is that there are these things like runbacks in raid. Every time I have to do a runback in a raid, I'm not having fun. I'm annoyed, and I'm thinking about how much time I'm wasting while I'm playing the game. I'm constantly looking at the clock, the in-game clock, and thinking about how many minutes I'm losing in the raid. It's annoying and it's a waste of my time. I don't care about being punished or not. I don't want to be punished because somebody decided to stand in the red circle. This isn't fun for me. This just makes me want to log off. I don't care about, like, there's not some sort of, like, ideology to this. There's not like a, oh, whoa, but it's not fair. I don't care. It's not fun. It makes me want to stop playing. I very strongly believe every single one of these things are like massive problems with the game. I think mythic lockouts are stupid. I think key depletion is stupid. I think runbacks are stupid in raids. I think the res protection metagame is stupid. I think 3 different trash mob abilities inside of each pack is stupid. I think having to have a warlock or you waste literal minutes, sometimes over 10 minutes of time, getting people back to a boss is a huge fucking waste of time. You amortize. You look at the percentage of time that you're actually playing the game and doing the boss versus the amount of time that you're waiting around is fucking huge. It's a massive waste of time. And so yeah, these are the main things that I would want to see. I would want to see changed in WoW. Remove all combat add-ons. Period. That's simple. Any add-on that helps you understand or see a mechanic better should be removed. Any mechanic, anything that gives you a timer for the boss should be removed. Anything that allows you to plan out cooldowns or something like that during the boss should be removed. All of these things do is they increase the gap artificially between a good player and a bad player. And it makes the gap in design worse. Stop making spells that are green with a green boss and a green background and a green floor. That's a huge fucking one. The mechanic visibility is garbage. It is so fucking bad. I can't... How is it so fucking bad? A lot of mechanics in WoW would be tremendously easier if they were a different color. How fucking sad is that? That the only reason why this mechanic is very challenging is because of the color. Question, what does not wanting to run back to bosses have to do with you wanting to be good again? Where's the logic? Well, people attack my ability to play the game because they can't attack the argument. There's no functional reason why running back in raids makes the game better. And there are a lot of functional reasons why it makes the game worse. And the truth is that I could probably play the game a lot and be good at it if I tried. Of course I could. It's a video game. It's programmed to lose. You guys know this, right? Like, these games are programmed to lose. There are strategies, you look them up on the internet, and you just apply the buttons in the way that the internet tells you to apply the buttons, and then you beat the boss. This isn't some sort of, like, indescribable complexity that the world can never understand. It's a fucking video game, and it doesn't really matter. So these are designed to be beaten. The reason I don't give a shit is because I have better things to do with my time. And I think that's the way a lot of people are. And even Ian in this interview acknowledges that. He says, hey, a lot of people have better things to do with their time than just sit there and do chores on WoW all of the time. And because of that, we're trying to make the game waste less of your time. Like trying to change a game you don't play? Absolutely. Because why don't I play it? That's the point. Think about, there's a lot more of me than people that are playing the game now.